Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining today's discussion. My name is Έντυ Ζεμενίδη. I'm the Executive Director of the Hellenic American Leadership Council, but more importantly today, a board member of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and a member of the board and a former emerging leader. I see a lot of my fellow emerging leader alums. The Council aims to foster a deeper understanding of global affairs, and that's why we are very honored to host the Defense Minister of Greece, Minister Nikos Dένdias, with us today to discuss Greece's evolving position on the world stage and its leadership in Europe and beyond. Minister Dένdias currently serves as Greece's National Minister of Defense, having previously served as the Foreign Minister. He was first elected to Parliament in 2004. A very propitious year for Greece, the Olympics and Greece's Euro Championship in soccer or football. He has held several ministerial positions throughout his career, including as Minister of Justice, Public Order, and Citizen Protection, which I must note as we confront rising anti-Semitism in this country and throughout the world. This is the minister whose efforts led to the designation of the neo-Nazi Golden Dawn as a criminal organization and led to its leadership being arrested. We will start off today's program with a discussion with Minister Dένdias, after which we will have some Q&A from the audience and online. Please hold your questions until the Q&A. I won't take them if you try ahead of time. Before we would begin, we'd like to remind everybody that this conversation is on the record, and any views expressed by the speakers we host here at the Council are their own and do not reflect institutional positions of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. With that, welcome to Chicago, Mr. Minister.
Thank you for hosting me. It's a great pleasure, and I have to say a great honor.
And, you know, kind of full circle, because when the Trump administration was leaving office, you dealt with them as foreign minister of Greece, and now as they come back, you get to deal with them again as defense minister. Let's talk about what you expect in the bilateral relationship at the beginning of this new administration.
Well, first of all, as you were kind enough to underline, I dealt with the Trump 1 administration. I had the opportunity to sign the First Amendment of the Defense Agreement with the United States, we call it MDCA, with Mike Pompeo in 2019, and also interact with them on many issues at the time. I think it was a fruitful relation, both for Greece, but also for the United States, for NATO, for our allies, for stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. So what I would expect from Trump 2 is exactly the same. An honest interaction which will lead to stability in our region.
One of the differences, and now you negotiated both MDCAs as foreign minister, but it expanded basing rights. In Trump 1, we saw then Secretary Pompeo come to Suda Bay, expand Suda Bay, which is Greece's, on the Greek island, the permanent aircraft carrier of Crete. Also, I believe, the southernmost NATO base. But in the second MDCA, you granted the United States expanded basing rights, and now the Suda of the North, Alexandroupolis. Can you tell our audience a little bit about this base, the development of Alexandroupolis, and why it's become so important to the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, Alexandroupolis is important for all. It's important for the U.S., it's important for NATO, it's important for the Western world, it's important for Greece. Now, for those who are not familiar with the map, and why should they be, Alexandroupolis is in the northeast of Greece. And kilometer-wise is the closest to the border of Ukraine that any other spot which could lead to communication lines, easy communication lines with Ukraine. So by including Alexandroupolis in the First Amendment, but expanding in the Second Amendment of the Defense Agreement, we offered to the United States, we offered to NATO, we offered to the Western world a way of communication to Ukraine and Central Europe that was not there before. Because before, the only available way was through the Straits and into the Black Sea, which obviously, it is not that easy, taking into account the current situation in the Black Sea. And Alexandroupolis has unique advantages. It has a huge airport, railway, road, pipeline to the north, so energy, FSRU unit in which American liquefied gas can come to Europe and resolve the energy issue of Central and Eastern Europe. So, frankly, Alexandroupolis has everything. And it's NATO territory.
And that really puts Greece, I'll go back to Secretary Pompeo's last trip to Greece. I believe he went to the north, to Alexandroupolis, yes, and then went to Souda and Crete, but did not go to Athens. It was incredible. The Secretary of State made this trip, went to two huge assets, but did not go to the capital. So can you, and that was a different world because you did not have the war in Ukraine that you have now or the war in the Middle East. How much more important has Greece become as a hard asset, given those two bases and the raging wars to the north and to the south?
Well, even even before Alexandroupolis was not on the map, I used to hear that there are two places, two bases in this world, which the United States can never leave. And they both start with S. The one is Souda Bay in Crete, and the other one is Subic Bay in the Philippines. Souda is essential, as you very rightly said. It's like an aircraft carrier, a huge aircraft carrier. Even how Crete is, looks like an aircraft carrier in the Eastern Mediterranean. But Alexandroupolis, the important thing about Alexandroupolis is anticipating. Of course, when we put Alexandroupolis on the treaty, Russia has not invaded Ukraine. But the need for a forward base of communication, of transferring energy, of transferring material with Central Europe and with Ukraine was there. The need was there. So both of them are, to my judgment, absolutely essential, to say the least, for NATO and for the United States of America.
We've talked about two of the bases, but there were a lot more. There were other bases in these MDCAs. Can you give us highlights? Because those aren't discussed as much, if at all, beyond Washington, D.C. Can you talk about some of the advantages at the other bases in Greece?
Well, for example, there's a base in Central Greece, in Larissa, where American drones do have a base, have created a base, and one understands easily, again, how important that is for the United States to be able to diversify within a country. I think Greece, really, with its stability and with its NATO membership and pro-American stance all around, it's generally a very, very useful country for the United States, for the interests of the United States.
Secretary Rubio, and I pulled it up, tweeted this the other day and gave direction to the State Department. He said, every dollar we spend, every program we fund, every policy we pursue must be justified by the answer to one of three questions. Does it make America safer? Does it make America stronger? Or does it make America more prosperous? I'm going to give you the chance to be the first world leader to say, hey, our relationship meets these standards.
Well, thank you. I'm not a leader, but thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, these are valid questions. I mean, every politician in any country of the world will be entitled to ask those questions. Stronger, safer, most prosperous. Yes. And I think that the relation between the United States and Greece, both bilaterally but also trilaterally with Cyprus or with Israel, but also within the context of NATO, really qualifies to answer an unqualified yes on both three questions. It makes the United States stronger, because they could project power. It makes the United States safer because they could address challenges through Greece. And it makes the United States more prosperous because Greece is a hub through which the United States can expand their exports in the over-region. We spoke about energy before. They could export gas in Central Europe, in Ukraine. They could use Greece as an entry hub to the European Union. But there is something more. There's a fourth yes on a question not answered. And that is the relation with Greece give to the United States a moral high ground? Because I remember that at the time the communist bloc existed, the United States of America were not just a country. At the same time, the United States of America represented an ideal, the ideal of a free world, of democracy, of values. So the relation with Greece answers with an unqualified yes to that value or priority. United States, through the relation with Greece, support a country, stable, Western, democratic, supporter of human rights, ally of Israel. So there are four yeses, not just three.
And to note, because Secretary Rubio was the co-author of a piece of legislation really relevant in your region, the Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act, which clearly stated that the U.S.'s strategy in the region will be based on its democratic Western partners and allies.
Hey, that's all about. We're always advocating that. Let's pick up NATO. NATO, and just as an alliance, there have been many alliances through the history of the world. Why was NATO so successful? Because NATO was able to project the idea of supporting values against, at the time, the communist bloc. Now terrorism, now Muslim radicalism, now Muslim Brotherhood. We advocate for a more democratic, more open world in which human rights are protected, in which everybody can say what he or she wants, can be what or she wants. We project values more than power.
You've mentioned NATO, you've mentioned the European Union. We've heard President Trump say that he's going to pressure NATO allies and European allies to hit the 5% spend of GDP. Greece has been for a long time hitting the 3%, exceeding the 3%. Substantially. Is that 5%, do you think, an opening salvo for a negotiation to get the rest of Europe up to 3%? And we know that there are European Union budgetary rules that are a challenge. Can you comment on Europe's trend line with spending and what are the challenges that have to be overcome?
Honestly, I let alone for a time, being the President Trump's remark on the 5%. We could come back to that. Yeah. Let's speak about our European family. Our European family, and I'm a strong advocate for the European Union, very much. I'm a true believer in the European dream and the European Union. Having said that, the European Union has some schizophrenic rules. Yeah. On the one hand, the European Union said that it faces an existential threat. Okay. And we should really create an autonomous defense, not in the sense that it's not connected with the United States, it's not connected to NATO, but in the sense that it can project also capacities, and also it could have a power of its own to protect itself and protect its friends and allies. So, fine. At the same time, when it says that, the European Commission clearly says that, there are fiscal rules which do not allow you to spend on defense. For me, being a Minister of Defense is a nightmare. I fight with numbers every day. And if I exceed limits as if they're carved in stone, my country is being put under probation, the interest rate on the bonds go higher, so I have to pay more from my taxpayers' money, and inflation gets in, my country goes backward to where it was in 2010. That cannot be the European answer to the challenges of today. Fiscal rules are not carved in stone. So the European Union, even without President Trump, has to address that challenge. And there are colleagues of mine, I could quote Minister Crosetto of Italy, which has said exactly the same thing time and time again. Now, 5%. Their partners and friends in the European Union that do not even spend 1%. And then they come and teach us about fiscal responsibility in Greece. What can I say? Do you know that Greece is a small country and a relatively small economy? We're a 230 to 240 billion euro economy. Do you know that Greece has more heavy taxes than Germany, France, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, and the United Kingdom combined? How could they address the challenge of Russia? I mean, what they can put in front of Russia's taxes. I mean,
so let's take that as a jump-off point to burden sharing and a more independent European defense identity. What are the capability gaps that Europe has to fill for the U.S. and especially this administration to say, okay, you're a worthy partner?
I would say that Europe, the European countries, have capable air forces. Many of them have been modernized with F-35s. They have Eurofighters, they have Rafales. So they have 4, 4.5, and 5 generation planes, which is quite good. Apart from that, we're in big trouble. We're a big mess. And I'll always speak openly. We have to upgrade the local capacities in our navies and in our forces. I'm using we because I don't want to clear Greece out and dictate to other bigger, more important countries than we are. So, but I have to say that Greece does much more than its size dictates for our common defense. Let me give you an example. As we speak, the European Union has two operations on the sea. Both of them have Greek names. One is Irini, which means peace, which is in the north of Libya, trying to stop arms being smuggled into Libya, which will feed in the civil war in Libya. The other one is Aspides, which means shields in Greek, in the Red Sea, in order to protect freedom of navigation in the Red Sea through the Suez Canal. Why do both operations have Greek names? Because Greece, small Greece, initiated both of them. And small Greece contributes assets, vessels to both of them. And not all our European countries do that. Well, I will rephrase. Very few European countries do that. Countries much richer, much more influential, much bigger than Greece. So we do our part. We do more than our part. But we need help.
And on that front, you are undertaking a modernization of the Greek armed forces. So that 3% is going to be exceeded for a while.
Now we are 3.4, 3.7. Well, there's many ways you could deal with numbers.
Yes.
Now, the truth is numbers rarely say the absolute truth.
Yeah.
But yet again, we spend a lot, yes. Take into account our size and the challenges to our economy. Because our economy, let me remind to everybody, we just got out of the worst crisis ever in our economy. 2010, 2019 was a nightmare. Greece lost almost 30% of its GDP because of that crisis. And it lost 30% of our GDP, partly because of our fault, but partly because the medicine we're given was worse than the illness. Mm-hmm. So losing 30% of your GDP is equivalent to losing a war. And usually it leads to an internal revolution. It was the Greek society that supported itself so that we got out of that crisis. So after that crisis, we have to reform. We have to reform our armed forces, we have to reform our economy, and we spend a lot on our defense, much more than countries that did not face the same circumstances as we did in the last 20 years.
And as part of the reform and the modernization, you have Rafales.
We do, yes.
F-35s are coming.
Yes, we got into the F-35 program, and we're proud because we need F-35 is the next generation. It's not just a newest fighter. It's a platform. It's it's a totally different culture.
You have French frigates coming, the newest generation.
The newest frigate in the world, if I may say, also the most capable one, with strategic weapons, 3 out of 4 of them, yes.
So what else, because you have been, as we discussed a few moments ago, on the front lines of new challenges, new wars, that are both in some ways typical, but also asymmetric. What other weapons are you looking at, or weapon systems?
Well, we're trying to create a dome. When we're speaking about the dome, everybody thinks about Israel, an Iron Dome, but it's not exactly the same, because what Israel faces is mostly incoming rockets and incoming missiles. For us, it's a much more complex environment. We have to be able to address drones, and huge number of drones coming towards us. And also, we only need a defensive dome, because we don't threaten, and we're not planning to attack anybody. We don't claim anything against anybody from our neighbors, but we would like to be able to protect our own. So we're trying to create a very complex dome which protects our airspace from anything incoming, including drones, including small drones, which is a challenge. I'm getting technical here, but drones can be that small. No, it's easy for any raider to take that drone for a bird. It is extremely small, and the way it flies, with inconsistencies sometimes, it creates the wrong image. So you have to have a very, very upgraded radar system. But also, we would like to be able to protect our seas from any incoming threat. So it's a multiple kind of dome, not just as the Israeli Iron Dome is.
As there are some questions and doubts, and even this administration is raising doubts about the value of NATO and the EU, the UN, in your region, and you've been on the front lines of this both as foreign minister and defense minister, you see a new regional order emerging. You referred to the trilateral of Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. There's also the mechanism of the 3+1, the 3 countries with the United States, which Secretary Pompeo kicked off.
And I don't take Egypt out of the equation. Egypt is a very important country for the security of the West.
Speaking of Egypt, that's where this trilateral became the basis for the now East Med Gas Forum.
Exactly.
Greece entered the 3 Seas initiative just in the past year. And by the 3 Seas, the Adriatic, the Baltic, the Black Sea.
That's explaining to those.
So Greece now adding a 4th and 5th sea in the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. And Greece is part of, which was interrupted by the October 7th, but the IMEC corridor, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor.
India is also a very important country. It's an upcoming superpower, and India has a role to play for a common security. India should not be neglected. And I'm very proud that I went to India. I'm very proud that the Indian Navy had come, and the Indian Air Force had come to the Mediterranean. We had also a common exercise with the Indian Air Force, which is quite unique. Who could have foreseen that, let's say, 20 years ago?
And so that's actually amazing, because when you look at all those institutions coming together, and the IMEC corridor actually combines the East Med stuff along with the Abraham Accords, along with India.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, but Abraham Accords, we read it right, because we are friends of Israel. But at the same time, I had the opportunity to sign the defense agreement with the UAE, with the United Arab Emirates, before the Abraham Accords. For us, it was clear that the dividing line was not between Israel and the Arabic world. It was between the powers that were looking to a prosperous, stable future according to international law of the sea, and the disruptive powers that were looking to other ways of creating chaos in the region. That's a dividing line. And also, I'm also adding Saudi Arabia into this equation. It's clear that we have very close to Saudi Arabia. I was with my prime minister in the kingdom just 10 days ago. Saudi Arabia also is a very, very important country.
So all of those initiatives, they started as commercial and energy. But now as defense minister, when you were dealing with the foreign minister, you were starting to lay out the rules of the road. How do we bring those all to add a security component to it?
First of all, what is the ground we should build on? The ground is clear, and I think it should be clear for everybody, at least everybody that wants to be part of this. And that's international law of the sea, respect of borders, respect of international treaties. That's what it is. Countries who subscribe to that are very much welcome to be interrelated on this very complex structure, which, as you rightly said, has to do with defense, but also has to do a lot with the economy. And defense and economy, by the way, in the modern world are quite interconnected. Everybody knows about dual-use projects and products which we use for defense, but also have a huge, huge impact on the economy beyond defense. So the challenge is to create an environment which is safe, which is stable, which is according to international law, which works according to international law of the sea, at the same time allows the countries that participate to grow their economies, to be more prosperous, and to cooperate between them in a defense ecosystem which also serves their economies on other sectors.
Okay, so let's look at the North. You have the 3 Seas initiative now features Poland and Greece, 2 of the NATO's highest spenders.
Baltic to the Aegean.
Baltic to the Aegean. Also, the countries that are on the front line of the Russian threat. How can that growing, emerging, in some ways ad hoc alliance stabilize Europe at this point while the Ukraine war is ongoing and the United States support is questionable?
Well, the way to do it is what we're trying, and I think we have achieved mostly, is to have a common narrative on the challenges we're facing. Why do we consider Russia a challenge now? Because we don't like President Putin? No. Because we don't like the Russian people? Far from it. Because we don't like the Russian culture? God forbid. Russia has produced it has a huge participation in the culture of the world. Who doesn't like Dostoevsky? Who doesn't like Tchaikovsky? But why so do we see Russia as a threat?
But here we don't like Ivan Drago. We're all Rocky people here.
Because Russia really did not respect international borders. Because it violated Ukraine's independence. We, Greece, have been friends of Russia for years. But Russia brought us into a dilemma when it crossed the border to Ukraine unlawfully. It did not respect international law. It did not respect treaties. So the idea is, can we create a common narrative which we can all subscribe to? If we can do that, according to that narrative, which I stated out very clearly, international law of the sea, non-violation of borders, respect for international treaties, if we subscribe to this common narrative, which is very simple, I would up the United Nations Charter, but this is obvious. We are speaking here about the obvious, not on some sort of utopia far away, but the obvious. Countries that subscribe to that narrative have a common understanding of the situation in the world today and could work together to address the challenges and hopefully address those challenges at the end of the day, sooner rather than later. It's not rocket science. It's not that complex.
You have referred to kind of the rules of the law, the rules of the road, the international law of the sea. So we'll move a little south and east because dealing with challenges. One of the great challenges that you have faced for years is your neighbor to the east. And we just talked about this emerging order, and when you think about 3 Cs and you think about the East Med institutions and IMEC Accord and Abraham Accords, it is striking that Turkey's absent from all of them. Is the blue homeland the reason, and can you also explain what the blue homeland is and why that's a threat and an obstacle to this this emerging order of cooperation and integration that we've been describing?
First of all, let's make it clear. I'm not happy at all that Turkey is not part of it. I'm not happy at all. Turkey is a big country, is an important country with a very, very proud history, and I would have loved for Turkey to be a part of it. I would have also, my country, but also myself, we are advocates of Turkey's move towards the European Union, towards a common European future, not just for our sake, but also for Turkey's sake, for the sake of the Turkish society. Because, as I said before, I believe that the European Union is the space of protection of human rights and of democracy that are essential to any society, the way as we see it. Of course, who are we to say? It's for the Turkish people to choose. It's for the Turkish leadership. It's for the Turkish president to decide. But the problem is, you mentioned this Mavi Vatan, blue homeland kind of thing. Now, did that exist 20 years ago? Was it written anywhere? Have you heard of it? No. This is new stuff. And if you see the map, it includes half of the Greek islands. Sometimes there are various interpretations. In one map I have seen, Crete was also included in that Mavi Vatan. I said as a joke, but it's not a joke at all. I'm very happy that my island Paxos and my island Corfu are not included in Mavi Vatan. Luckily, we're on the other side of Greece. So, what is this Mavi Vatan? It is a neo-imperialist, neo-Ottoman dream of a part, likely not the whole, of the Turkish political establishment, which clearly threatens Greece, which clearly violates international borders, which is clearly against international law, which is clearly against international law of the sea. And let me be frank, it's a total nonsense, because it will never happen. Never. But what it does is entraps the Turkish society in a confrontational angle towards Greece, a country that is close, it's much smaller, and a country that could be extremely useful for Turkey as an entry point towards the European Union and towards the West. And a country that has no claim against Turkey. We don't claim even that a rock that belongs to Turkey today is Greek. So it could be, in my humble opinion, it would be extremely easy for Turkey to agree with Greece on almost everything under one provision. International law of the sea, Charter of the United Nations, recognize borders, international treaties, that's that. Does it sound very complex? Is it very difficult? But yet again, who am I to say?
No, theoretically, that's what we've been fighting for in Ukraine and elsewhere now. Go one more south, because you referenced a little further south, you referenced the mission, and it goes to the Trump administration's call for allies to take greater responsibility. You already led that in the Aspidus operation in the Red Sea. I'd like you to describe that operation and Greece's role in protecting sea lanes in general. But two, we entered 2024 thinking that Iran's proxies were on the rise. Israel did the hard work and defanged Hezbollah and Hamas. But we haven't heard where the Houthis are. And since you've been on the front lines of the Houthis, would like an assessment where the battle against the Houthis stands.
First of all, you're right. Israel was extremely successful against Hamas and extremely successful against Hezbollah. And I will not hide for you, Greeks, we're not friends of Hamas. We're friends of the Palestinian people. I've just 4 days ago, I've signed 700 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza. So we are friends of the Palestinian people. We are friends of the Arab world, but we're not friends of Hamas. Let me be clear on that. Now, on the Red Sea. Again, there's a principle in the Red Sea. And the principle is clear, is freedom of navigation. We cannot allow any group, any terrorist group, any actor, state actor or otherwise, to interfere with the freedom of navigation. It has to do really with the world economy, with the welfare of every human being on this planet. And now the Houthis have found a very simple way of interrupting that. They just put rockets, missiles, and threaten any vessel that goes north towards the Suez Canal. Not Israeli vessel, because they claim they do it for the Palestinians. Not Israeli vessel, any vessel, any vessel. So we, Greece, by a historical paradoxon, we have the biggest merchant fleet in the world. So for us, it's a duty to ourselves, to our people, but also towards the world economy to protect freedom of navigation. So we started advocating for an operation there. We came to Operation Aspides. We have the leadership of the operation. There's a Greek officer in charge of that operation. We're contributing assets, ships, towards that operation. We put our sailors in harm's way. Let me be frank. These people face dangers. And I've been to the Red Sea 4 times up to now, exactly to tell to the Greek sailors that they are facing life threat because they protect the interests of my country, because they protect the interests of Europe, but also because they protect the interests of the world navigation, which is essential for the level of living of every human being. Let me make it very practical, because ideas sound abstract sometimes, and people maybe in the 21st century do not care. But let me tell you that a plastic cup, a small plastic cup in a Greek supermarket is now 4 times more expensive than it was before the Houthis started this. Because this small cup has to go around the whole of Africa to come to an Athenian supermarket, which affects the level of life of my compatriots, but also of all Europeans. And at the same time, it creates problems for the countries that produce this small plastic cup, because their products becomes much more expensive. So it deteriorates living standards to the recipient, but also it deteriorates living standards to the producer. And who does that? A small group in the middle of nowhere, the Houthis, which, by the way, they're getting lots of money through not clear channels, and they're creating a new terrorist paradigm, which, if other groups follow, the world economy is in trouble. So Houthis is a challenge that has to be addressed. It has to be addressed. We should not just think that it has to do with just Israel or just Africa, or it's a problem in the middle of nowhere. It is not that. It is an emerging threat.
And going back to Secretary Rubio's equation, that the operations of the Red Sea certainly make America more prosperous, because as we learned during COVID and with Suez traffic, that interruption of global supply chains affects us here, not only the supermarkets in Greece. Greece just started its a 2-year stint in the UN Security Council. So again, on the front lines of even...
Well, I worked very hard for that. And I'm so happy that it happened. Not because Greece was elected, but because Greece was elected with a clear agenda. And the clear agenda I repeated before: international law of the sea, treaties, international treaties, borders, recognized borders, also human rights, rights of women. And I hope that my country, which is a small country, would serve the needs for that international agenda that could make this world a better place. I don't believe that we can change everything, but small steps really could create a huge difference in the end of the day.
Well, you lay out a compelling vision of how our 2 countries can marry both interests and values. So we thank Greece clearly in 2015, when you were in a crisis, I don't think anybody in this room or elsewhere, I see Alan Rich from our board here who has been involved in Greece, I don't even think he would have, and he's pretty good at predictions, would have anticipated such a global role for Greece. But here you are, and I think the region, your partners in the United States are grateful that Greece continues to put all its hard assets and soft power and a diplomatic weight beyond this marrying of interest and values. Before we get to questions, do you want to respond to that?
No, I'm just saying, well, we're not punching above our weight. We know who we are. We're not a big country, but we think we're doing our duty towards the world community. And I think we carry on our shoulders, on our small shoulders, a huge tradition of values coming from ancient Greece and what ancient Greece really provided for the world civilization of today. And we're trying to play a role with dignity and respect for everybody.
I'd like to open up to questions. We got one right here. We got the microphones coming around the room.
First of all, Minister, thank you for being here, and to HALC for organizing. Minister, in Greece in particular, you know, we face in our neighborhood issues which are incredibly nuanced, I would say, with our neighbors. On the flip side, international law, law of the sea, requires incredibly nuanced understanding to fully comprehend. As the world sort of seems to be moving towards more simplistic views on international relations, how do we, as Greece, more effectively communicate our nuanced issues to partners?
Well, thank you. That's interesting, because can I answer?
Yes, absolutely.
The challenge for me, especially in my previous role as foreign minister, is to explain to my interlocutors what we're facing. And you saw Aegean, if you look at geography, very many islands. If you look at the world map, very small, much smaller than Lake Michigan. So explaining what things are were not easy. That's why I tried to define it in a way that is understandable. And that's why I quoted the 4 layers of legality: international law of the sea, also borders, international treaties, international. It's just a list of 4 things. So I would put the same list in front of Turkey, and I would say, if you please subscribe to that list, then we're done. That's the whole problem, or 99.9% of the issue between Greece and Turkey would be automatically resolved. But let's give you another example. We are in front of a blackboard together, and we're being asked to solve a geometry exercise. And there are just 2 students. The one student is called Greece, and the other student is called Turkey. And they try to solve the exercise. But one of the 2 students use Euclidean geometry, in which parallels exist, and the other student uses paralleliptical geometry, in which parallels do not exist. Can they ever solve that exercise together? Never. So, can we solve the issue on the Aegean with Turkey, with our friends the Turks, without Turkey accepting the rules of UNCLOS? There's no way we can achieve that. Can we solve it if Turkey has issued a threat of war against Greece, a casus belli? It's unique in the world. There's no other country in the whole world that has issued a threat of war against a country if that country exercises legal rights according to international law. We, Greece, are facing a casus belli from Turkey if we exercise our right from UNCLOS to extend our territorial waters to 12 miles. Can we solve our problem under those parameters? Unfortunately, no. Have I lost hope? No. No. Because I believe deeply in the rationality of human beings. And I believe that eventually, at some point in time, Turkey, the Turkish people, the Turkish leadership would understand how more prosperous we could both be if we could be, and it's easy to achieve it, the best of friends. We can be the best of friends. We share a lot of things. But that probably will be in a more distant future. But I hope I will be there to see.
I think we got a couple here. Right here first.
Minister, I'd like to ask you about Syria and after the fall of Assad last month, and whether Greece perceives any potential new risks emerging since the new interim government is so close to Turkey. Relatedly, Turkey has said it wants to delineate maritime borders with Syria in order to expand hydrocarbon exploration in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I'm wondering if Greece intends to engage with this new government, maybe also to discuss maritime borders, and whether you perceive this as becoming a new potential pitfall between Greece and Turkey and its disputes over maritime borders.
Well, thank you. First of all, nobody, no rational human being would cry over the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. We were all happy to see the Assad regime go. Having said that, what we're looking now is for a creation of an inclusive government in Syria, and hopefully a democratic future for the Syrian people. A future that would allow Syria to become prosperous. Syria can be a very prosperous country, has a huge, huge cultural tradition. Future that would allow refugees to come back to their home country, and also the existence not just of an inclusive government in Syria, but a government that abides by international law and by international law of the sea. Now, if such a government would choose to be friendly towards Turkey, towards Turkey, it's fine with us. We don't have a problem. We don't try to exclude Turkey from the world. Rather the opposite. Would that future government would like to delimitate maritime zones with Turkey? Again, fine with us. I have signed 2 delimitation agreements myself, one with Italy and one with Egypt. And I'll be glad for Turkey to sign delimitation agreements with all the countries of the world, including Greece. But what is the caveat? Within UNCLOS, within international law of the sea. Because Turkey has proven in the past that it could do things that are absurd. For example, they have signed an agreement with Libya delimiting Eastern Mediterranean, which goes right over Crete. It assumes that Crete does not exist. Let me give an example. It's like Greece and Spain delimiting the Mediterranean and pretending that Sicily is not there. The line passes over Crete. So if it does something like that, of course, that's a problem. And let us not forget that right next to Syria, there's another country. And that country, with an internationally recognized government, is the Republic of Cyprus. So I assume, I'm not here to speak for the Republic of Cyprus, but I assume that Cyprus has something to say on that. So those are the parameters.
My last question about whether Greece also intends to begin negotiations with Syria on maritime borders.
Well, I don't think we could, unless I imitate Turkey on the Libyan-Turkey Memorandum of Understanding, I don't think we have any common border with Syria. That would be opposite of what geography dictates. But I think for the Republic of Cyprus, that is a totally different question. But we will be glad to engage with their own inclusive, international law-abiding Syrian government in the future. But I have to say, at this point in time, I'm not the Greek foreign minister, and I don't speak for the European Union, because as you understand, we are always trying within the European Union to have a common approach. First of all, we have to raise sanctions. We need solid proof from the new Syrian regime on issues that you all very well understand.
Since you referred to Cyprus, Mr. Minister, there is a question from our virtual audience. You referred to the tons of humanitarian aid that you've already authorized to Gaza. As we know, Cyprus played the key role in the maritime humanitarian corridor. It's actually the role because it launches from Cyprus, Amalthea initiative. How is Greece looking to expand or support this effort, this humanitarian corridor, with the further aid and maybe the rebuilding of Gaza?
I instructed our Navy to have 4 vessels ready to carry aid to Gaza. And we're also...
From Cyprus?
From Cyprus, even from Greece. But Cyprus has to be the mid-step. Because, the effort of the United States to create this technical port failed because of the weather, because of many things. So we need Cyprus as a stepping stone. But we have the vessels which would help. And I have offered this help also to other countries in the region, like the UAE, like Qatar, like Saudi Arabia, like Bahrain, like Egypt, that would like to help Gaza. So we are ready to be the carriers of that, the Greek Navy, to be the carrier of that humanitarian aid, apart from what we offer ourselves, using the Republic of Cyprus as a stepping stone in order to do this. But also, we are ready to offer our help. Again, we're not punching above our weight. Let me be clear on that. We're to offer our help both to Gaza, but also to Lebanon. This is our region. Maybe more, but this is our family. I mean, the Arab world, Israel, Egypt, this is our family. So we would like to create a stable and prosperous future and would like to help as much as we can with our limited resources. We are there to help. And we have no hidden agenda. The last time we acted in the region as an imperialist power, were I think the times almost of Alexander the Great. So I think they have forgotten and they have forgiven.
We had a question right here. Mike's? No, we got, so the audience can hear. Right here. No. Front row. No. Front row. Sorry.
That was a fantastic presentation. However, you have not touched the problem of all the refugees from the Middle East and Africa flooding into Europe. What can be done about it?
And we have a related online question about what are the challenges, how do we respond to the allegations of pushbacks, overcrowded camps? How does Europe have to change its asylum procedures and protect children and families?
Well, sir, I didn't advocate on this, but I had to deal with this issue. Back in 2012 up to 2014, I was Minister of Citizens Protection in Greece, which is the equivalent of Interior Minister to other European countries. So migration phenomenon at the time was my job to deal with.
Really Homeland Security
it was,
Secretary here.
That's what it is. And my answer was, at the time, was simple. First, you have to protect your borders. I mean, that's what borders are for. Borders is not the Millennium Park. You cannot just walk through. Second, you have to have a reason to be in another country. And there is a clear definition. There is laws that says when and how you're allowed to enter a foreign country. And also, there's rules when you're entitled to asylum. And economic problems, economic hardship is not part of that. So, in my time as a minister, but also my government now, what I advocated and I implemented is the biggest program of voluntary returns ever. And we were the champions in the European Union at the time. So it's twofold. You protect your border, you create an efficient asylum authority, which gives asylum to the people that are entitled to asylum, but also you have the very vigorous return policy. You return back to the countries of origin that the people that are not entitled to be in your country. Having said that, you have to look also more forward, towards Africa, towards Central Asia. You have to create conditions which help people to stay in their homeland. And the European Union spends lots of money for development aid, lots of money, but I'm sorry to say, not so efficiently. We have to be much more respectful for the local societies. We have to understand more local societies. Just sending or spending money without understanding local needs, without paying close attention to the local communities and to the local conditions is not successful. It's like throwing money out of the window. So it's a very complex problem. And also there's a part of the political establishment in Europe, Chancellor Merkel was part of that, which for a period of time I advocated for open borders, presenting that as humanitarian. Sir, allow me to say that it's not humanitarian at all. And I have to say I do not give the monopoly of heart to anybody. It is not humanitarian to create a brain drain in all African countries, opening the gates of Europe and disallowing everybody that is useful to stay in his or her homeland and create a better future in that land. So I hope I answered. But again, it's a very, very complex question. There are no easy answers and there's no silver bullets. It's a very, very long process. And we have to live with the migration phenomenon. Humanity always lived with the migration phenomenon. It was always there. We just tended to sometimes not to focus our attention.
I'd like to follow up on that only from a defense and security standpoint, because we've seen even here that human traffickers, I believe human trafficking has now become
it's a huge business.
The #1 form of organized crime in the world.
Yeah.
Italy a few years ago decided to take the war to human traffickers because the procedures you talked about are once the migrants get to European shores. We see these desperate people putting their lives in danger, and these traffickers putting them on overcrowded ships that are sinking. I think we've had more deaths in the Mediterranean than ever before. Is there any consideration within Europe to taking on these human traffickers, not to let them keep putting these people in a desperate situation?
I think Europe is got into some sort of trap and is conducting within itself something which corresponds to a dialogue of the deaf. Answering if it is humanitarian or non-humanitarian to address migration, as you said, within Europe. When refugees come to Europe, regular or irregular, legal or illegal, that's the European dialogue. It has to concentrate, exactly as you said, on the countries of origin and including the problems of the countries of origin, the phenomenon we just mentioned, smugglers. Human smugglers. If we could spend towards addressing the challenge of smugglers equal amount of money that we address towards the challenge of drugs, I think we could be extremely successful. But we tend to ignore it. Even worse sometimes, we present smugglers as protectors of human rights. I mean, come on.
I think we had one right here. Lexi? Yeah, right here. No, yeah, her.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your comments this morning. One aspect of national defense that's become increasingly important and more complicated with the evolution of AI and more increasingly sophisticated technologies is the cyber warfare front. Can you speak to how Greece's strategy from a cybersecurity perspective has evolved and how that's going to impact the kind of future vision you have for defense in Greece?
Yeah, thank you. It is quite technical. But it's a huge challenge. First of all, we have to appreciate the existence of the challenge. And that goes not just for Greece, but for many countries on this world. What we have done in Greece, and I will be very specific, we have immediately created the directorate in the Greek Armed Forces, which are responsible to address that, because it has to be holistic. It has to be a holistic approach. Cybersecurity has to address its challenges coming not just for foreign actors, but it could come from groups, it could come from common crime, it's a challenge that can come from anybody, even from a very young but very talented hacker, which could really block the whole banking system of a small country and lead to economic catastrophe. So although it sounds abstract, what cybersecurity is up in the air, what do you mean about it? Is as important, having cybersecurity unit is as important as having an army, having a navy, having an air force. It's a new level of threat. And you have to have really people that are specialized in dealing with that and deal with that on a day-to-day basis because the threat exists. It may not present itself, but the threat is there. And we have to live with that for the years to come. But what we have done in Greece, as an answer to your question, is we have created a unified unit. As we speak, we construct a new building in the Greek Pentagon, exactly to house this new unit, this new directorate to address the challenge. Because I thought, not because we wanted to build more, but because I wanted to, by creating a new building, to give a symbol of this new level, new front in which we have to protect ourselves.
Mr. Minister, everyone, thank you for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you back in good weather, and hopefully you'll host us in your home island of Corfu or Kerkira.
I'm glad to have you. What I can promise you is a better weather.
Thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you all at the next council program.